All right, well, welcome. Welcome everyone to Impact Dashboard Live. We're going to be taking a look at Impact Dashboard, our online web-based economic development impact model today. We'll kind of go through a brief overview of the software, what it does, how it works, what the reports look like, and then we'll also talk about some of the newly released features that we put out over the weekend, so that we have a blog post about it, but I'll go through and touch on each of those new features briefly in the discussion today. So just to kind of back up at a more basic level, what is Impact Dashboard? Essentially, it allows economic developers to run the numbers on their economic development projects. So we're looking at a couple screenshots from our model right here. This is showing us kind of an overview of the types of information that comes out of the model. So for example, an economic development project that's going to create 50 direct jobs paying $40,000 a year. Here we're summarizing kind of what's the total economic impact of that in terms of the total number of jobs, the salaries paid to all of the new workers. We can also see we've got a list of different sources of net benefits. So we have some benefits in terms of tax revenues and other sources of fees and revenues, and then we have some costs, so government costs to provide services and different things. And so we boil that down to a net benefit over a period of time. In this case, it happens to be 10 years. So we can see this project, as it stands, will generate about $254,000 in net benefits for the community over the next 10 years. A big part of our model includes looking at incentives. So if we were evaluating potentially a $75,000 incentive for this project, what kind of rate of return and payback period can we expect? The model can also account for property tax abatements and sales tax rebates as well. Before we jump into, we'll kind of walk through an example of a project today, but before we do that, I just want to kind of explain a little bit about Impact Data Source, which is our company, and then Impact Dashboard, which is the product, our web-based model that we're going to talk about today. So Impact Data Source, the company, was established in 1993 by my partner, Jerry Walker. Essentially, we're a consulting company focused on economic and fiscal impact analysis. So we prepare those studies for economic development organizations or other governments to help them understand economic development projects and other developments in their communities. Most of our clients who are reaching out to get an individual report or a one-time report, so to speak, are trying to evaluate incentives or some type of economic development agreement. And so with that background, kind of that experience in history, we saw an interest in the need in kind of a software solution for some of our clients that wanted to be able to run these reports themselves and to do some of this analysis themselves. And so for clients that don't just want this on a one-time basis, but maybe on an all-you-can-eat basis, we have our online model, Impact Dashboard. So it's a web-based app. We have over 100 clients using the model right now across probably more than 15 states at this point, and covering probably more than 150 counties as well. Our clients kind of represent a wide spectrum of economic development organizations, cities, and counties. So we have small cities with populations under 10,000. We also have large metro areas as well. So let me switch over now to Impact Dashboard and just kind of walk through an example of what this all looks like and what Impact Dashboard allows you to do. So here I'm looking at a list of all of the projects that I've created in Impact Dashboard. If you were just starting out, you wouldn't see any tiles here. But in my case, you can see I've got a bunch of different tiles. And I'm going to click on one of them. I'll click on Project Zip here. And Project Zip is going to take us here into our control center, where we see a list of all of our scenarios that we've created. So this is kind of like we had a folder for a project, and then within that folder, we created different copies of the analysis. So maybe if you're doing this, comparable thought process might be you're doing something in Excel and you wanted to change a couple things, and so you do a save as, and so you've got 3 different versions of, let's say, this Excel file. Well, in this case, that's kind of what we're doing here with our online model with our various scenarios. So right now I've got 3 scenarios. If I click on the preview on this left-hand side, I can see the specifics of each one of those scenarios. As I click on them, the right-hand side updates to show me the analysis that's taking place in each of those. Now, if I wanted to get into more detail, obviously what I'd do is just click on the name of this scenario, and we'll jump into the scenario in depth. Before I do that, I just want to point out a couple other things on this Project Control Center page. Number one, down here we have a place to apply tags to a project. So if we want to think about grouping our projects together in different categories, for example, I'm using a tag for the fiscal year. So if I wanted to say this project, Project ZIP, is associated with fiscal year 2019. So I want to put a tag for fiscal year 2019. I can do that. I'm also using a tag, as we can see here, for a headquarters project. So I've got an HQ tag. And then I can also apply other tags. There's a couple of my other ones that I'm using throughout my program, or downtown or TIF, so you can create whatever tags are appropriate for your community. Now, the other thing that we can do on this Control Center page is to upload other documents that we can kind of just keep together or aggregate with this project. So for example, if I had, in this case, a draft economic development agreement that I wanted to kind of keep associated with this project, we can do that as well. And so this, if someone logs into your online model, and you can see all the different scenarios, and you can see some documents associated with it, so you can keep things nice and organized all in one place. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my original data scenario. This one, I did a 10-year abatement and a $4,000 per job incentive. And I'm going to kind of work backwards a little bit. I'm going to jump straight to the end and take a look at the report. So the point, or the reason that our clients are using Impact Dashboard, is to run the numbers on their economic development projects. And so what that really turns into is being able to generate these reports to identify the impact that this project will have on their community. So in this case, Project ZIP includes 340 direct jobs. And once we consider our spin-off jobs from this employer, we're going to have almost 600 total jobs. The direct workers themselves will make about $65,000 in this case. When we add the spin-off workers, the average across all of those new 600 jobs will be about $51,000. Now, the capital investment associated with this project is $70 million. That's in terms of the new building and the FF&E that they're going to add. And then we have a box that indicates the impact on residential development. So in this case, we're expecting maybe 47 households or worker households to relocate to the area. And then out of that, maybe 7 new homes in this case. We have estimated that 7 of those people relocating would actually build new residential property. Now, all of those economic impacts that I just summarized there, listed in those boxes on the right-hand side, are going to contribute to the fiscal impacts of this project. And that's what's represented there in the chart that we see over a 10-year horizon. So we've got benefits marked out in our dark blue boxes. We can see that increasing over the 10-year period. That, if we kind of added all those 10 years together, that would be $4.5 million as it's summarized right there. Then the costs, which are going to be the negative values that you see here below the line, that's going to represent about $1.9 million in costs. So on a net basis, our net benefits, represented by the orange, is about $2.6 million in net benefits over this 10-year period. So that's really the focus of Impact Dashboard. We're trying to zero in on the net benefits that this project would generate for an individual tax entity. So in this case, it's $2.6 million for the city of Arlington. If we were to click on a different entity over here, like the county or the school district, we'd be able to see what that entity receives on a net basis as well. But before I do that, I want to just drill down on this $2.6 million in net benefits, and we provide additional detail on that. So here we can see that number repeated again, $2.6 million. The present value is listed as $1.9 million. The present value represents the discounted cash flows back to present terms. In this case, we're using a 5% discount rate. So instead of thinking of this as $2.6 million over 10 years, we can think of this as the equivalent of $1.9 million today. You have the ability to change the discount rate within the model and do a number of different things. Now, the 2.6 is the total net benefit. If we look specifically at the benefits, we can see we're getting some sales taxes, some property taxes, utility, city-owned utility revenue. In this case, I've got some a number of different revenues all adding up there. We can see to 4.5 million. Now, on the cost side, we've got the cost to provide those utilities, and we've got costs of government services. So for a city's perspective, this is going to represent things like the cost to provide police, fire, EMS, those sorts of things. Now we can see we also have some asterisks here. So we're saying relating to these real property taxes that the values that are included up here exclude this property tax exemption of about $2.5 million. Now, so this happens to be a little bit of a coincidence that our net benefits are 2.5 and our property tax exemption is 2.5. That's not the same number. And in fact, if we were to say, let's forget about the property tax exemption, we're not going to give that to them, our net benefits would increase by this amount. So these values would increase by $2.5 million, and then ultimately our net benefits would jump up by that same amount of $2.56 million. Now, in addition to that property tax exemption that we're evaluating this project, we're also looking at an additional incentive for $4,000 per job being paid out as we hire those workers. And so that's what this analysis is looking at here on in the gray box. This orange line represents our net benefits that will be paid to the city or that are being accrued to the city. So this $2.6 million by year 10, that's this net benefit. So this orange line is just graphing our net benefits being added up over time. Now, the $1.36 million total incentive, which is equivalent to $4,000 per job, is paid out in 4 different chunks. That total amount here of $1.36 million intersects our line right around 6.5 years. So essentially, our payback point, the point at which the city will recoup enough revenue to cover the value of that job grant, will be 6.5 years. And on average annual rate of return, that's about 19% average annual rate of return. Now, the rest of this one-page report just kind of notes our other net benefits for the county, the school district, and so on. If we wanted to dig into more detail on those, we certainly could by clicking on the Tarrant County report here and see those results here and whatever incentive analysis we might have. Now, we can print these one-page reports off and get a PDF version if we just click print here and save those to your computer. The other thing that we can do is click on this detailed report and we'll be able to see a kind of a more traditional narrative detailed report that walks through the report and shows information for all of the tax districts. So those one-page infographic reports focused on a single tax district. In this case, the detailed report shows the impact across all the entities. So for example, if we look at our fiscal impact overview, we can see a table that shows the benefits, costs, and net benefits for each one of our entities. In this case, the city, the county, the school district, and the hospital district. If I scroll down on this report, we'll go to another section for the public support overview. And in this case, we're just summarizing the total amount of the incentives on the table. So we had a property tax exemption that was being offered by both the city and the county. And then we had the $1.36 million in non-tax incentive from the city. So in total, it's about $4 million in total incentive package for the project. If I continue to scroll down, we'll just go through each one of the tax entities in this detailed report and address each one of the types of incentives that are included in the model. Now, this is, as I mentioned, where we are heading with all this information. This is the information that can provide context to your city council or your economic development board as they consider projects. But I want to step back and show how our users are entering the information and how they're able to configure these reports. So if I go back to our scenario info, this is where a user would be able to put in information about the project. For example, we have the input for jobs to be added here. We've got 340 total jobs. We can see they're added over 4 years. If we had a hiring schedule that was actually longer than, say, just these first 5 years, we can click expand and see over the full 10-year period how those jobs might be phased in. And as I make changes, so for example, if I wanted to change this just briefly, you can see my numbers all calculate and update in real time. So I'm putting in different numbers, and we can see the right-hand side is showing us the dashboard results as we go along. So obviously, job count is an important input. If we click through here, we can see the other types of information that we're being asked about the project. So if I hit continue, we want to understand or estimate what % of those new direct workers will actually relocate to the city. So do we have a sense from the owner of the business if you're going to be relocating workers to the area? We want to maybe account for that. If you're going to be hiring local workers, you may still be hiring some people that would say, hey, there's a bunch of jobs over there in Arlington. I want to move to Arlington, and that's where I'm going to live and work. But in a place like Arlington, Texas, you'd probably have a lot of people commuting in, and so that might not factor into this relocation component. But you do have the ability to type in whatever number you want, but without any other information, we do provide a default that is community specific. If we hit continue here, an input we want to know is the average salaries that would be paid. Next up would be the capital investment. In this case, we can see we've got $50 million investment in the building and a $20 million investment in furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Those inputs are going to be used to estimate our taxable property and filter through our analysis and result in the tax calculations for property that we get throughout the model. The next input is relating to building permits and fees. So we can put in a value there. In this case, I have input for hotel occupancy taxes. I've entered the amount of hotel occupancy tax would be generated by this project per year. So in the case of headquarters, they might have people, coming back to the headquarters and staying in a local hotel, and that might generate some hotel occupancy taxes for us. The next input in this particular model happens to be taxable inventories. A lot of states are moving away from taxing inventories. So for our clients that are in, say, Ohio or Indiana and a number of other different states, most states, I would say, you won't see inputs for taxable inventories. But if you're in the state of Texas, where we still tax inventories, we will have an input for that type of property. And then finally, we have inputs for taxable purchases and taxable sales. Again, this one kind of depends on the local tax structure. Texas communities generally have a local sales tax that they collect on local taxable purchases. Some states do not have a local sales tax or even a state sales tax. And so in those cases, when we build a model for those clients, they won't see inputs that don't apply to them. So essentially, as a user, as our clients, all you need to enter in is this project-specific information. So tell me about the number of jobs, the salaries, and capital investment. And what we're doing on our side is configuring the background so that we've got the right property tax rates in there, that we're asking the right questions, and indicating, whether or not certain questions need to be asked. So on our side, we're taking away or taking the burden off of you of understanding the local tax structure and those sorts of things. We do that when we set up your model. One of the parameters that I did not talk about here was this industry input where you can select a NAICS code. And our model relies on economic impact multipliers that we get from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. And so these are essentially the RIMS 2 multipliers that we see for the community. And by identifying the industry, we'll pull in the multiplier. So in this case, for every direct job, there would be 1.76 total jobs for this employer. And so that's where we're kind of making this industry specific when we see these spin-off numbers, the direct versus spin-off in total. So that's the information that you as the user would need to provide about the project. Now, as the user, you can also specify different types of incentives. So for example, in our example, we had a property tax exemption. We have a couple different schedules here that we're using for the building, and then a different schedule for the FF&E, and we can see the value of that property tax exemption that we saw this number earlier, but now we can see how it was calculated specifically. Now, we have a graphic version of this. We can see the graph, and we hover over it. We can see the actual values if we wanted to. But we can click on this table and actually get the table view if this is more valuable to us. So that's property tax exemption. We allow some flexibility around the naming. For example, you can call it a property tax abatement, exemption, rebate, or reimbursement. The other types of incentives that we are allowed to model for different types of tax districts would be sales tax rebate, and that could be on the initial purchases of construction materials or FF&E. We can also rebate sales taxes on the project's taxable sales. If there were some, we can put that a percentage in there. And then finally, the other type of incentive that we can look at is something that we call just generically a non-tax incentive. But this would represent, for example, in this case, the $4,000 per job in job creation grant. And so in this case, it's $1.36 million over 10 years, or I paid out over 4 years, but the analysis runs out over 10. We do have the ability, if we didn't want to do a $4,000 per job, we might say, hey, we want to get a certain payback period. Maybe we look at this and we say, yikes, that's too long. We can't do $4,000 per job. We have to wait 6.5 years to get paid back. You could come in here and say, actually, I need to do an incentive, but my upper limit's going to be 3 years. So what incentive would be associated with that 3-year payback period? So we fix our 3-year payback period, and we calculate that in that case, it might be around $620,000 of a non-tax incentive. So our per job amount would be close to $1,800 per job, excuse me. So we can kind of configure this any way we'd like. So if we wanted a 50% average annual rate of return, now we'd be looking at about $520,000. And if we just wanted to plug in an incentive amount, because we knew, let's say it was an infrastructure grant that was going to be about $1.5 million, we could plug that in and see what that looks like. So those are a couple of different options that you have when you select those incentives. And if we go to our report, we'll see that everything gets updated in real time as we do that. So for example, on that infographic report for the city, we can see now our $1.5 million incentive has us getting a 7-year payback period. So that is the basics of entering this information and viewing the reports and configuring those incentives. The great thing about Impact Dashboard is that we can go back to our project control center and we can see all those changes we've just incorporated in. We'd be able to copy this scenario and start making adjustments, and we didn't have to re-enter all that information. So it's that kind of that save as feature, so to speak, where we can give this a different name and start over just tweaking the small things that we need. So that gives us that ability to do these different scenarios. And as I go back, I'll step out even further here now to the list of all of our projects. We can see we can do this within each one of the various projects we might have throughout the year. So we might have multiple scenarios, say 3 scenarios for Project ZIP. These other projects, you can see I've got a number of scenarios and a number of tags. So this list of all of our projects is just kind of a way to organize things so we can identify project outcomes, so we could move projects to different status. So if the status, we want to move this over to our won status or lost status or archive status, we can do that. And let's say that this was one that we won, we can move it to that. It takes it off of our active screen, and up here we can navigate to our projects that we've won, and now we can see Project ZIP is listed there. You can move these back however you'd like. So I can move it back to my active list if I'd like. We can also search and filter by tags. So if we want to find all our 2019 projects that happen to be in our downtown, we can find those. Obviously, if you need to create a brand new project, you just click Create Project here and be able to give it a name and then start adding scenarios. One other feature I'll talk about, so in this idea, if we're going to create a brand new project and create a brand new scenario, we do have the ability to request data from prospects. So we'd be able to send out an email from within inside the app that's going to generate a data request form that the prospect could fill out. So if I would put in our prospect's email address here, so that whoever your contact is, we can send an email, maybe customize the message a little bit and hit send. That email is going to go out to your prospect. You're going to see it, you're going to get copied on it, and it's going to give that person a link to fill out a data form that's going to look exactly like what we're pulling up here. So this is got my branding on it. This is my demo account, my demo EDC. And if I scroll down here, these are the inputs that we're asking that prospect to complete. So it's basically the same information that we would need about the project to run. So number of jobs, the salaries, capital investment. We do ask for some other background information. If they want to share some other information with us, they can do so. And they can hit send, and when they do that, that's going to send an email to you and let you know that they've completed that data request, and you can then essentially just, with the click of a button, create a scenario with the data that they provided. I'll show you what that looks like in one where I actually receive data. So here, I send out a data request, and now this says data received. So if I click on that, I can click create scenario with the data. And if I were to do that, I actually already have. But if I were to do that again, I'd create another scenario with client data. And so it prevents you from having to copy over or to print out and then type in that information that the prospect sent you. So that's a lot of information about Impact Dashboard in just about 30 minutes. I'm going to touch on the updates that we have just recently incorporated into Impact Dashboard. We have a website on our kind of an aggregate. We can pull that up. If we go to impactdatasource.com/update, that is the location where we're going to post all of our latest product updates. So we can see just on Monday, or Tuesday, whenever it was, we released or published this blog about the latest features on Impact Dashboard. And so I'll talk through each of those items here briefly. So if we just kind of go through these first bullet lists, we'll talk through each one of these. So we added a new public support overview description. So we have the ability to apply descriptions to our project in a couple different places now. I'm going to use a different project than I was looking at earlier. So I'm going to click into this project alpha. And here we have a project description that it kind of applies across the entire project. This one's always been around. This one's not new. This is where we can put in a description and it'll be shown on the first page of the detailed report. So for example, I could type some information about this project represents farm machinery manufacturing company seeking to locate new facility in Burleson. The company plans to hire 400 workers, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so if we entered that information in and we could go then to our report, we would see on our detailed report, essentially the first page of our report, we've got a description of the project, and we can see there's our project alpha represents this thing, right? And so you can type however many paragraphs as you want, and that'll help you give context to this report. Now, the feature so this description has always been around, but we recently added what it says here is our new public support overview description. And so we have a section in our report for the public support overview where we allowed users to now enter a description for that public support that is summarized then below. So on the public support page, we can go to our overview. This is a new tab, and we're showing a table that summarizes this impact. And now we can enter a description just like on the project, but in this case, this is going to appear in the public support overview section of the detailed report. So again, if we go back to our report, we can see that summary that I've added appears in the report in this specific section. So if you wanted to be able to describe more details about your public support that you're considering and the results that are shown here, you can provide that context here. That is essentially that first feature. Now, the second item that we added recently was this advanced description text formatting, and we've seen that a little bit at work here. So if I go back to my description, the basic description of the company, we can see I've got these two tabs. I've got write and preview, and what we're able to do is put in some kind of markdown text, as it's called, to really add emphasis and formatting to our description. So if I wanted to just make this a little bit bigger, we can see the whole thing. If I hit preview, we can see when I do that, I'm able to incorporate bullet points. I'm able to bold certain text, and I'm able to add a number of different things. I could number lists. I can create tables, all sorts of things. If I click on this formatting help, it'll take us out to a page that we've created to explain some of this markdown. And so this is, it's a little tricky to add this syntax and to kind of get things maybe bold or italicized, or bold and italicized, to create lists, whether you just want bullets or whether you want numbers. You can create some headers even within this. And so we can see a preview of some of these examples in our markdown text here. We can see what that looks like and all the different types of formatting you can now incorporate into your description. And this might be more than what you need to do in a lot of cases, but the great thing about this is if you're really trying to polish off the report so that when you print off this detailed report, you really are able to summarize what's happening. This is a great way to do it. So it gives you the ability to make bullet points, extra paragraphs, bold things, everything. It's really nice to be able to have more control over that. So that's a feature that we added recently. One of the more advanced things that we have an example on the blog post about is the ability to create a table as well. And so if you wanted to see how that was done, you could grab my text here and put that in to see how that gets formatted. I did that here on this public support overview where I put a table of our specific incentives. Of the non-tax incentive is composed of a $200,000 job grant and $150,000 infrastructure grant. So that's where the $350,000 is coming from. This no longer matches with what I was doing here, but that's okay. This is just an example of what you can do. But getting this table to format nicely is something that we didn't have the ability to allow users to do prior to this. So now it takes a little bit of trickery here with formatting a table. It's certainly not easy or slick to do, but if you wanted to get a table in your report, you do have the ability to do that with a little bit of work there. So that is the second bullet on our list here, this advanced formatting. Then finally, the last two bullets are kind of not as detailed or as significant. We added the ability for users to contribute a portion of their sales taxes to a tax increment financing district. And so this one really gets down into a more advanced feature, but if we were to click on our settings and we wanted to enable a TIF district for this project, so if the project was going to involve diverting some of the incremental taxes from the project to a TIF entity, so a tax increment financing entity, we can make those specifications here where we might contribute, for example, the 35% of the additional incremental building taxes from the city of Burleson, and as well as these other entities. We're contributing 35% of those taxes to this TIF entity, and now the new feature is this fact that we can contribute sales taxes as well. So if I were to run this, it's going to change our analysis a good bit, and we would now see a number of differences. If we go back to our report, we'd see the inclusion of some TIF district revenues. So TIF district receives about $140,000, and so we're able to contribute from both the property tax aspect, but also the sales tax aspect. So again, this is the TIF entity, the tax increment financing entity, had already been included for maybe a year or more, but the new piece that we added, the new feature, is specifically related to being able to contribute sales taxes to the TIF entity as well as property. And then finally, we added some extra flexibility around the terminology. We actually already looked at this earlier. If you wanted to call your property tax an abatement, an exemption, a rebate, or reimbursement, you can now do that. The feature that the thing that we just added was this new terminology, the reimbursement. Previous to this, it had been abatement, exemption, and rebate only. Now we've included the terminology for reimbursement. So that's pretty much, we do that for property tax and we do that for sales taxes as well. So it's kind of any place where we have some flexibility around the terminology, you can now use reimbursement. That's pretty much everything I wanted to run through here. We got a good overview of the app as well as some of these new features, which admittedly kind of get into a number of other features that are a little bit more advanced. But if you have questions about Impact Dashboard or how we can customize this for your community, please feel free to reach out. Again, you can reach me at paul@impactdatasource.com, and feel free to ask me any questions directly. If you're interested in getting a copy of this video, we're going to send it out tomorrow with a follow-up with just a video, a link to the video from today. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out directly. And I appreciate you taking the time today to join us on Impact Dashboard Live. Thanks so much.